Hi, and welcome to the third series of the Fancy a Brew podcast, talking about adventure, pushing your boundaries, and chasing dreams of underwater exploration. The podcast is supported by Dive Life Scuba Diving Centre, the one-stop shop for all your recreational and technical dive gear and training needs, boasting a 5-star service and their own in-house gas blending and equipment servicing department. For more information, take a look at their website, divelife.co.uk, or on Instagram and Facebook. In this series, I'm going to be chatting to some of the divers I've met along my scuba dive adventures in the last couple of years, ranging from boat skippers, stunt performers, and underwater explorers. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, grab yourself a brew, sit back and enjoy this week's episode. So Stuart Douglas, welcome to Fancy a Brew podcast. What brew are you on? What have you got?
Best builder's tea.
Oh, yeah.
It's the colour of stained oak, I think. I can't stand milky tea.
Oh, I'm the other way. I like it dead. Well, I'll have one sugar, but not so I don't like it dead sweet. But we've just gone on to skimmed milk, and I have to have like a pint of milk in it to get it anywhere near. It's like piss.
Nah, it's
You stand a spoon up in yours?
Just about. Yeah. If I have more than about 4 cups of tea, it lines the inside of the cup and it stains it a nice dark brown. So God knows what it's doing to me insides.
Right, so do you want to give us a little bit of a sort of brief insight to who you are, perhaps why I've got you on, and then we'll see where the conversation goes?
Yeah, so I joined the mob. I'm an ex-Royal Navy clearance diver. Joined in 82, left in 97. And for people who don't know, the clearance divers are the Navy's permanent diving branch. They do bomb disposal, IED disposal, used to do saturation diving. Nowadays, very shallow water work, beach reconnaissance alongside SBS, etc. So it encompassed pretty much anything that was done underwater. We did it. Underwater engineering, say bomb disposal, video surveys, the lot.
Well, I just want to touch on now, because while it's still fresh in my mind, you're off out tonight. Do you want to tell us a bit about that? Because that sounds like it's something I should have booked, because I only saw it on his Instagram a couple of days ago that he was doing these tours. So it's something I want to get on.
Yeah, so we're off to see, I think it's Jason Fox's Is It Life at the Limit tour, Northampton tonight. It's been postponed God knows how many times. The missus she's well into all the SAS Who Dares Win stuff. She loves seeing civvies getting beasted for pointless reasons. So she's well happy. If someone's uncomfortable or unhappy, she's happy. But yeah, we got to see. She bought me tickets like 2 years ago for my birthday, so it's finally come round tonight. So we're going to see him.
The reason I wanted to touch on him is he sort of inspired me to start this podcast. I was going to go on a similar route to him, but how sort of resilience and mental health issues affected divers, whether it be in a good or a positive way. Some of us are scared of deeper, darker water. Others use it as a release and all that. But to be fair, not a lot of people wanted to open up in the way that they seem to do on his podcast. Have you listened to his?
I haven't, no. But I mean, he's a real ambassador for sort of the mental health, because obviously he had to leave due to PTSD, and it affected him really, really badly. And I think people respond because he's a public figure. Yeah. And they seem to want to respond to that. And he's doing a lot of good work for ex-forces in general, this sort of mental health. Yeah. And I think that having watched the programs they do now, a lot of it is about getting people through bad problems that they've had, and it's almost like the SAS Who Dares Wins being a catharsis for people who are trying to get past real bad personal issues.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the people he's had on his podcast are the likes of Nims Dye, who did, all those above 8,000 peaks. So whilst they are breaking bounds or boundaries of resilience, physical as much as mental there, though, there's always a story and a backstory to it all, and it kind of, he just plays it really well, and it was just like he's talking in a room over a brew with his mate, and that's kind of what I wanted to sort of come across with this podcast, but sort of steer it along the lines of diving. So not so much, your stereotypical scuba diver, but so whether it be a clearance diver, saturation diver, someone who works in the media, all that, anybody that has anything to do with diving, really, bring it all together and just expand my horizons and hopefully inspire other people in that respect. Then, so you joined the Royal Navy in 1982. I was 2 years old then. Don't want to make you feel old.
Yes, I was a late joiner. I originally wanted to join the RAF and passed all my exams to go in aircrew. Got a place guaranteed on the aircrew training at Cranwell, because ever since I was sort of a youngster, being a pilot was what I wanted to do. And I dicked around too much at school and come out with not enough qualifications. Went back to school, carried on dicking about too much. Couldn't get in, didn't get the right required qualifications. And so I thought, well, I'm not joining the RAF. If I can't fly them, I don't want to be anywhere near them.
Yeah.
So the next stage, I was going to look at joining the army. But at the time, the Troubles were quite prevalent in the news, and my mother was absolutely adamant there's no way I was going in any infantry regiment and going over the water.
Yeah.
So I joined on a technician apprenticeship course in the mob, and true to life, I dicked about too much on that, and I got into the diving accidentally. I was on board one of the ships one day, Bristol, the first big ship, and daily orders comes up, and at the bottom, was anybody interested in becoming a ship's diver, contact the MEO, the Marine Engineering Officer. So I popped up to his office, and, yeah, what's it about? He goes, oh, just be on the jetty, 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, and we'll get on. So we got took up to Horsey Island, pot dipped 30 metres, they lobbed a set on the back, big mass clearing, sat at the bottom, bashing away at a chain link with a hammer and a cold chisel for a little while, came up, and they went, that's it, you passed, you'll get a course date.
Wow.
And that was it. I thought I was going to go sit in a classroom, get a little presentation on what it's like to be, and anybody wants to apply now. That was it. I was in. Got a course date through, 4-week course. Jesus, they beasted the crap out of us on that course.
Yeah.
Because the clearance divers, they looked down on ship's divers. It was a limited role. You were only qualified to 30 metres. It was self-contained air sets only, and all you were doing was ship's bottom searches for limpet mines, etc. In the event of sort of what they called Operation Awkward. Basic underwater engineering checks, like taking gauge readings on the shafts, etc. Bit of prop scrub, and that was it. So we got, I think, the princely sum of £1 a day extra pay, special service pay at that time. But you got a Gucci diving badge to go on your uniform, and that was it. As soon as I did that, I thought, I love it. So I hated the job I was doing in the mob. I was getting into trouble a lot. You know, on the annual reports, if anything didn't match up to scratch, it was always underlined in red writing. And I had so much red writing on my fucking reports, it was unbelievable. Really? Yeah. So I thought, I've got to get out of here. I'm not doing well, you know, and it's going to come to a nasty end. So I applied to go across to clearance diver because I thought I loved the diving. I was spending more time in the diving store on board the ship than I was in my own section. So December 86, yeah, I got my aptitude, week-long selection test up at Horsey Island. Again, you got absolute shit beasted out of you. And it was a case of proving how much you wanted it. Because, you know, the bottom line is you can put a monkey on the end of a breathing hose and it'll still breathe.
Yeah.
But the branch prided itself on sort of being elite, which is one of the reasons I wanted to join it. And also the fact that you had to work hard to get in. And it was only when I was in the branch you realised why you got the beastings that you did, just to test your resilience and just really how much do you want this job. Because the work was hard in the branch and the conditions sometimes you were working in were crap. And they were dangerous conditions. So if you've got someone who's going to bail out, you might as well have them bail out on the selection course rather than bail out when you're in the middle of a job. So we had a week of getting beasted, run around the island. I mean, the basics of it was they used to drop you off at the bottom of the island, which I don't know whether you're familiar. Horsey Island is an old torpedo testing lake just up the north end of Portsmouth, and it's 1 kilometre long by about 100 metres wide. So you'd have your initial day, you drop off at the bottom, you'd run your kilometre up to the end of the section. You'd be given 2 minutes to get into your suits and be assembled on the jetty with your fin under your arm. Jeez. 3 circuits of the lake, which was jump up off about 3-4 metre board into the water, fins on, fin across the lake, 100 metres across, run back round. You'd have 3 of them before you even started the day. And that was on a good day. If you paid the instructors off or you weren't working hard enough, that would be expanded. And they had all sorts. I mean, you used to run to lunch with a telegraph pole and you only ran one way around the island. It was only ever clockwise. So if you ended up coming out on the wrong side of the island, you'd have to go all the way down the bottom, all the way up the top, all the way round back to the section again. So lunch, you take a telegraph pole to lunch, you take a telegraph pole back from lunch. If you annoyed the instructors, you take the telegraph pole off the boards and across the lake with you and run back round. But it got you fit because you needed to be reasonably fit to do the diving.
Yeah.
But again, it just tested how much do you actually want this. Are you doing it just basically because you feel like doing it, or do you doing it because you really, really want it? And at the time, I think it was about a 70% failure rate on the courses, mostly from guys just going, yeah, I've had enough of this. I don't want to do this anymore. With the amount of running that you did without trainers on the bottoms of the dry suits, we might as well just run in bare feet.
Really?
So you get shin splints. By the time you come to the end of the first 4 weeks of course, most people are carrying some form of slight injuries, sort of stress injuries to the lower limbs, etc. Yeah, it was hard work. But so I went across, did the selection in the December, passed that, put in to go for it, and I struggled actually because at the end of the selection I was sat in front of one of the Fleet Chief Warrant Officer divers, and basically his attitude was, why the should we take someone like you in this branch? He got my report in front of him and he was just reading off all the red writing, and he going, yeah, we don't want to take other people's problem children.
Yeah.
So I was like, so I pleaded the case, said basically I was not happy in what I was doing. I loved the diving. This is where I wanted to be. And I basically got the gypsies warning that we'll take you, but if you act like this in the branch, if you're successful, then we'll kick you straight back out again, back into the general service fleet. But no, loved it. I did my course in 87, and that was it. Never looked back since. Really fantastic time.
There's so many jobs out there that people end up in and they've not had to graft for. Like put themselves through the ringer, have they? And they just don't know how lucky they're to have found something that they're happy in. Whereas I think I'm quite like you. Certainly at school and during my childhood, I dicked around in so many things because I just wasn't stimulated in the right and pushed down the right direction. And then when you find that little niche that you want, you're like the best at it because it's what you've needed all your life, isn't it?
Well, that was one of the reasons, because I get bored easily and I need challenge and stimulation. The general service life was crap. Basically, it was just repetition, day after day after day. You got treated like shit because you were a junior rate. One thing I found about the diving branch was you were treated like an adult. That most often you were working alone underwater. If you were doing work under a ship, you'd come up, you'd brief the supervisor, he'd brief the captain of the ship or whatever, and what you said was what went. If you said something,
carry a bit of kudos though, don't you?
You did actually, and the supervisors would always say. I mean, I'll get articulate. One job, we ended up the supervisor bogged us off the job because the skipper of the ship wouldn't believe what I'd told him was going on under the water. So he dragged us off the job, went back, picked a load of video kit up, came back up, done the job, and showed him that what I said was happening was actually happening because they wouldn't believe it. But yeah, you got treated like an adult. You worked hard, you played hard, and it was really, really good. I mean, so we did the course. Basic course was 16 weeks. So you spent the first 4 weeks up at the island, learning how to use the kit. At that time, we all used closed circuit O2 rebreathers. So you spent your first 4 weeks doing nothing but oxygen swims on closed circuit rebreathers, basically building up your stamina and your skills to the extent where you could do a 2K swim in less than an hour. That was when the criteria, down to the end of the lake, back up again before the set ran out. The time of the set was governed by the CO2 absorbent. So you had a 60
same now with mine, yeah,
you had a 60-minute life on the CO2 absorbent, 90-minute operational time, but training it was down to 60 minutes. So if you couldn't make it down to the end of the lake and back, which was like a 2K swim in less than 60 minutes, you basically weren't cutting the mustard. So we did the first 2 weeks of that, 4 weeks, sorry. Then we went off to Portland for a week doing seabed searches, learning basic stuff like circular search, box searches, jackstay searches. Then we were up to Scotland for 4 weeks doing deep dives, working up to 50-meter air dives, surface supplied air, 54-meter on mix, same set, but just different gas mixes. then off to Chatham for the EOD section of the course. So you learn all about naval and ordnance, DEMS techniques, etc.
Those sort of deeper air dives there to sort of like 50 meters. Did you feel narked at all?
Oh, I was useless. I just laid on the bottom of the shot, giggling like a schoolgirl.
Really?
I used to get narked up to buggery. Yeah, terrible. But obviously, once somebody's in your ear saying, "Come on, pick yourself up, crack on," you could work. But yeah, I had to work my way through narcosis. It really first ones really caught me bad.
I don't knowingly. You know, they always say when you don't know anyway. If you've got it, they reckon everyone gets it. I don't knowingly notice that I've got it. Maybe I'm just too giddy anyway or something. I don't know. But my wife gets it horrendous from about 25, 30 meters, and it almost worries her to the point that she's like, if you can't calm her down, she wants to get out.
Yeah, I mean, it affects different people different ways. I mean, some of the pot dips, we did 50-meter pot dips. You'd see people getting giggly. Some people would just go into it. I guess it's like alcohol. It's the same as alcohol, really.
Yeah.
It affects different people different ways. Some people get silly drunk. Some people get miserable drunk.
Yeah.
Same with narcosis. Some people go in on themselves and they get a little bit anxious. Other people are just happy.
What kind of gas mixes? What kind of gas mixes did they put you on there then? When you said you went up to like 54, didn't you?
Right. So the DSSCD, diving set self-contained clearance diving, was a 4-mix set. So it'd run pure O2, and you basically altered the flow on a reducer valve, dependent upon what gas mix you're on. So it'd be on pure O2 on 1.5 litres a minute.
Yeah.
Then it would go to 60-40 on 12 litres a minute. No, 6 litres a minute. That got you down to 24 metres. Then 40-60 would take you to 42 metres on 12 litres a minute. Then 32.5, 67.5 would take you down to 54 on 13 litres a minute.
I love how you've got like a photographic memory with all them numbers, because
it's just got drilled into you.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, basically, yeah. It's all, you had to learn everything. I still retain quite a lot of it today. But the set was brilliant. The set didn't change much from about the 40s or the 50s. It was developed from the Slade and Charioteer set. So if you watch things like Above Us the Waves, the sets they're using in that were very, very similar to what we were using. Rubberized canvas harness with a counterlung, chest mounting counterlung. In the center of it was a canister of soda lime, kilogram of soda lime, single breathing hose. So you had to employ pendulum breathing to clear your dead spaces down. Sets mounted horizontally across the back. Then emergency cylinders on the front. Really, really comfy to swim in. Weights were 12-ounce ball weights in an envelope just between the shoulder blades.
Right.
Put you in a perfect swimming position. It was so streamlined, so comfortable. If you did O2 on demand, you binned your rear sets and you worked off 2 1.5 litre cylinders on the front, and you'd breathe the counterlung down till it got tight. Nip a bit of gas in, breathe it down again. Breathing O2 on demand got knocked on the head because if you passed out either through shallow water blackout or anything, there would be no gas coming into the lung. At least with the flow set on the way we used to use it, then you'd still got gas coming in. So even if you passed out, you wouldn't die because there's still a flow of oxygen coming into the set. Right. But yeah, it's one of the most comfortable. Obviously, it's superseded in the late 90s by the Carlton CDBA, and then since then it's gone on to the diving set, the Divex CDLSE. Massive bloody great thing. Good for 83 meters, but not good for swimming in. So all the shallow water swimmers now is done on the Divex Stealth O2 rebreather.
Right. You mentioned something there that I don't think I've heard of before, and if I have, and if I should, well, pendulum breathing. What's that?
Yeah. So with most of the rebreathers now, you've got a twin hose system.
Yeah.
So you've got an inlet hose and an exhaust hose. So effectively, the only dead space is a little section in front of your mouthpiece between the two hoses, your block. Yeah. Whereas with the CDBA on the DSSCD, you had a hose that was probably about a foot long from your mouthpiece into your center of your canister. So that's all dead space. So if you didn't do what they call pendulum breathing, which was effectively a forced breathe, not a normal in and out, if you just breathe shallow, all you do is shift the CO2 in that dead space up and down. And you wouldn't force it through. Yeah, you wouldn't force it through the absorbent and then drag the scrubbed gas back in. Right. So you soon find out, you start getting headaches, etc., that you're not breathing properly. So the one good thing about the set was you'd never really overwork it. You could breathe as hard, you'd breathe like a racehorse, and you'd never overwork the set. I think it had a 8-litre counter-lung on it, which is obviously most. They dropped it down actually. The old CDBA had a massive counter-lung on it that used to, when it was fully inflated, used to come up way past about halfway up your ears.
Yeah.
This one they dropped the counter-lung down a bit to, I think, 8 litres. So you'd really, breathing like a racehorse, you still wouldn't really bottom it out, even if you've got lungs like bloody Thor. You wouldn't breathe it down. So you could work as hard as you liked and still get the gas that you needed. It was a good set. And I say it stayed virtually unchanged from about the 50s.
I guess that's why I've never heard of it, because I obviously have a rebreather and I've no need to do that kind of breathing. I just breathe as hard or as normal or as simple as I need to.
Yeah, because as I say, you've got to clear that CO2 out of the dead spaces, and if you've got a foot of hose, that's quite a bit of space. You've got to push that gas through there, draw the good gas back up again. But say with a basically a breathing block, you've not got much more than about 4 inches of space, and inside that, you may have a couple of cubic inches of space that you've got to shift out. So there's no real need for it.
So what did that, after you became a clearance diver, then what did you sort of day to day consist of? What did you get up to?
The bread and butter of the branch was mine hunting. So you could get drafted onto a mine hunter. So you'd be on mine hunting patrols. The thrust of that was contact spotted via sonar. So you go out in the boat, there'd be diver, standby diver, supervisor and attendant out in the boat. And they had a aluminium, it was a dodecahedron. They called it an iconosphere. So they'd lower that off the front of the boat, and it used to give a big sonar picture because of the shape of it. Right. So what they'd do is line you up effectively or theoretically over the top of the contact. The diver would then follow that line down, shot line down. All things being equal, you'd be smack bang on your mine, investigate it, do what you need to do, come back up. So that was mine hunting divers. So the day to day, you'd be part of ship's company on there, but you do 6-hour watches. You'd have a part of ship to work, which was usually diving store or prepping and managing the diving equipment. So most people do 18 months on a mine hunter, then you'd apply for a shore team. I started off on the shore team, so I started on the Portsmouth area clearance diving team. So they had the responsibility for all the EOD tasks between Weymouth and Whitby.
Yeah.
And also all the underwater engineering tasks in Portsmouth Harbour, as well as any IED disposal duties as tasked by the EOD tasking unit at DIDCOT. And we worked 3 watch rotations, so that the team was split into 3. So one section of the team would have a week of what we call on response on the road. So they'd go off and do all the EOD jobs, etc., up and down the coastline. One section of the team would be the up harbour team, so they'd go up Portsmouth Harbour doing all the underwater engineering maintenance tasks. And one team was section, so you do the kit maintenance, etc. And you'd go on a rotation. So 1 week in 3, you'd be on the pager doing on the road jobs. 1 week in 3, you'd be up harbour doing the engineering. And 1 week in 3, you'd be in the section doing maintenance. So day to day, you'd spend the first hour of the day doing sport. So 5-a-side, water polo, etc. In the section, or if you were up harbour, you'd be 8 o'clock in the morning, kit on the boat, up harbour to do whatever you needed to do. If you were on the road, you'd be expected basically you'd be in the section doing maintenance kit or waiting for pagers to go off, or once every now and again they do what they call a milk run. So they'd start in Weymouth and they'd call in at every Coast Guard station, police station, etc., pick up all the crappy old flares, etc., that have been handed in, then head up towards Whitby and come back down again at a place called Southwold. We just go on the beach, dig a big hole in the beach, put it all in there, blow it or burn it, cover it up again, and that was that. So they'd do that probably once every couple of months.
Right.
So that was the main thrust of that team, and quite a lot of it we were getting German mines out in the Thames Estuary. I mean, the Germans absolutely saturated the Thames Estuary area with mines in World War II. And And I particularly like that part of the EOD course because the engineering and technology in the German mines was just absolutely fascinating.
Were they sort of beyond, were they beyond us, like, yeah? Were they more technically advanced, you think?
I think so, yeah. In terms of the capabilities, I mean, my favourite, if you can call it favourite, was the C-type parachute mine.
Right.
About 10 foot long, 1,750 pound of explosive in it. And they just parachuted these all over the place. So if they landed in the water, hydrostatic switch would arm when they went below 10 meters, and they'd turn into a mine. And they were acoustic, magnetic, and pressure influence mines. So they'd sit on the bottom, and basically the noise of a ship going over would trigger them. They needed two triggers. So it needed either two acoustic signatures, or an acoustic and a pressure, or a pressure and a magnetic, or any combination of the two to go off. So they'd reduce the risks of false triggers. If they landed on land and that pressure switch wasn't activated, a timer would set them off to go as a bomb with a random timer between 24 hours and 90 days.
Wow.
They got so many anti-handling devices that once they were in the water, if you lifted them up, once they went shallower than 10 meters, pressure switch would activate and set it off. If you try to disarm them on land, they've got various things like dummy screws on tail covers, turn it half a turn, and it sets off an anti-handling device, photoelectric cells, all sorts. The
Really?
condition, when we pulled some of them up, and they used a metal called Rhine metal, some variation of steel, not a bit of rust on them. So in some instances, there's still paint on them, and they've been rolling around on the bottom for like 80 years.
Jeez.
And the guys are still dealing with them now. So they were good ones. Yeah, I really enjoyed dealing with them.
It sounds not like a fun job.
It was fun if they were just on the bottom. I mean, occasionally trawlers would pull them up. I mean, some of the fishermen knew areas where the mines were. So if they had a crappy day's fishing, they'd go off and trawl around that area until they pulled something, call it in, because they knew basically that once we blew it up, they'd lose all their nets. So they then get the insurance for the nets, and at least they get something back off of it.
Yeah.
So sometimes they'd be in a net, so you'd have to actually get inside the net, pack the device, and get back out again. So it's not a lot of fun in limited viz. Sometimes at night, going into cod end of a trawling net to pack a mine. So yeah, that's why you say about resilience. That's why they needed in the courses physical and mental resilience.
Yeah, lads who could probably dig deep.
It was hard work. It was an arduous job sometimes and risky. Yeah, I think. Yeah, there's only once I've nearly carked it in diving, just once.
So when you're doing jobs like that, if for those people who have no idea what we're talking about here, if you take yourself back to like a James Bond film and stuff, whenever he's pulling the detonator out, it's always he's not got much going on. He's on dry land. It's nice and steady, and he's only got a bit of sweat coming off his brow, hasn't he? You'll be on a boat there. It'll be howling. Wind will be coming in. Rain will be coming in. It'll probably be dark, and you've got to contend with this thing that you're not sure if it's going to go off or not because it's been there where it shouldn't have been for 80 odd years, and you just don't know, do you?
Yeah, just because it hasn't gone off doesn't mean say it won't. Chances are the batteries have run down. Although, I mean, way before my time, they've pulled these things up and taken them off to ARE at Portland and found charge still in the batteries and clocks inside still working.
No way.
What we were told was a lot of them were made by prisoner labour. So they'd bend a firing pin occasionally so that it would trigger, but a firing pin might hit the side of a pocket and not actually hit the detonator. Yeah. But like I say, you've got a potentially functional mine down there at 1,750 pounds. I mean, if you're sitting on top of it dealing with it, you ain't got a lot to worry about if it goes off. If you're on the boat above, it's a little bit different. But it focuses the mind when you're dealing with explosives.
Can you just give us for the sort of layperson that might be listening to this, the difference between an IED and a UXO? So there's a bit of a difference, isn't there?
Yeah, UXO is bombs, mines, missiles, etc., that are basically created in a war, and what you'd call normal munitions, the sort of things that get left behind after a conflict. An IED is what's called an improvised explosive device, homemade. So it might be homemade explosives using quite commonly accrued stuff. I mean, the IRA's favourite was farmyard fertiliser and diesel. They've gone a lot more sophisticated now. So that, I mean, it's anything that involves something that's been put together by a civilian from various components. So you'd have basically your timer power unit, your detonator, and your explosive, some means of setting it off. So it can either be a manual trigger, like you move it, letter bombs when you open them, etc., right up to things mobile phone triggers. So they're very complex. So whilst you can, on UXO, what you'd normally do is apply an explosive, an overpressure charge, which then high orders the device safely. If that's impossible, you'd use trepanning techniques. So over a very long period of time, you would cut a hole, 2 holes in the device, one at each end, insert a steam hose, and you'd steam the explosives out into a section of coconut matting, and then just set fire to it.
Right.
Because explosives will burn, but won't explode. They'll only explode when they're actually triggered and are encased in something that stops them from burning quickly. Basically, an explosion is a very, very fast burn at thousands of meters per second. Once an explosive's out, you set fire to it, it will burn fiercely but won't explode. So if you can't move the explosive and it's not safe to detonate it in situ, such as in a built-up area, the only alternatives you have then is basically trepan and steam. Right. But with IEDs, because you don't know who's made it, you don't know the techniques that have been used in it, the approach is very, very different. I mean, we started watching that Trigger Point last Sunday. I had to turn it off. I was nearly throwing a shoe through the telly at it.
I can bet you were.
So, you know, it's far removed from the cut the green wire algae. It doesn't work like that. Most of the time, the way forward is to disrupt the firing circuit. OPSEC notwithstanding, you'd use a disruptor device that basically can disrupt the firing circuit before the firing circuit has a chance to fire the device.
That's what
off.
They did on that show, wasn't it? So the side of that thing they put behind the toilet, that was that disruptor, wasn't it? That little sort of
we used to call them a pig stick, which basically fires a jet of water via an explosive charge. It hits the device and breaks it up quicker than the firing circuit can engage and detonate the device off. So that was the main thing. Most times you'd use a remote approach using the wheelbarrow. Very occasionally you'd have to do a manual approach and place the disruptor in place. But you know, it's only when you're in a high threat situation such as Afghan, etc., where they're doing manual approaches and actually disarming this on site. So I mean, that was way after my time.
You did serve though in Iraq, didn't you? You went out to Kuwait.
I was out in Gulf 91 on Fleet Diving Unit 2. So we August 1990, obviously, when Iraq invaded Kuwait, we got put on standby. All the kit was prepped, and we were mobilised in January 1991. Went out, and our primary role was sea-based mine disposal. So we were locating mines in the northern Persian Gulf, disposing of them. And the technique we used, we were deploying off the Sir Galahad via helicopter. You'd spot a mine from above because they were really easy to spot. They were white painted, big 145 kilo buoyant mines. That was the main ones that we were dealing with. So you'd spot that from the helo. That'd be marked on GPS, and then they'd do a transit line up and down, or a circular search out till we found another one. And once you got a plot of 2, you could do a transit line to find the rest of the stick of mines. So then we'd plot those coordinates down to the lads in the boat. They'd go out and they'd just pack each one in turn and blow them. Or if we had individual ones, we'd deploy from the helicopter. So you just drop out the helo for about 20 or 30 feet. If they were surface mounted, so the buoyant ones that had come off their chains and were just floating, you drop in next to it with snorkel, mask and snorkel, 4-pound pack of explosive all detted up, attach that, call the helo strop in. Helo strop hits the water, you light the fuse, get out. So we were blowing those. Then February 28th, once the ceasefire came in, we moved into Kuwait, clearing the harbours. So we were diving in the harbours, and that was manky. They had about an inch of oil on the surface of the water. So we were having to get through the skin of oil, and then it was all nil vis because there was no light penetration, basically, because the amount of oil that was on the surface. The harbours were pretty horrendous, actually, because I mean, I don't know what your listeners' age range is, but the Iraqis had murdered a lot of the dock workers and just thrown them in the docks with their feet tied to concrete blocks, basically.
Wow.
So we were coming across human remains in the harbours, as well as ordnance that had been thrown in. So clearing all those out. We spent 6 weeks basically living in cargo containers on the side of the docks. We lived like tramps. We were sort of grafting 6 days a week.
I bet it smelled romantic in there, didn't it?
Yeah, we looked a mess. We were having to beg, borrow, and steal kit from the Yanks, actually, because we were not well supplied. So one of the lads was a bit of a whiz at procuring kit, and we did a job on the Gloucester, actually, HMS Gloucester. It had snagged a mine cable, so a couple of us flew up there to the Gloucester to basically saw through the mine cable, because the mine cable's in the rudder and the mine was held up firmly under the underside of the ship. So they were stuck up in the northern Persian Gulf. So normally when you dive under a ship, all the shafts will be locked off, tagged out. So they'll be locked off. The key tags will be given up to the dive supervisors. There's absolutely no way shafts could be turning or any underwater ducts, vents or exhausts will be running. In this instance, the skipper said, none of the shafts are going to be locked out. They'll still be turning, but very, very slowly. So if we get a contact coming in from Iraq, silkworm, etc., we're going to up revs and off we go, whether you're in the water or not, regardless.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit.
I suppose a very expensive ship versus a very soft and fluffy.
Yeah, two replaceable divers versus millions of pounds of the ship and hundreds of ships company. So that was a focus moment doing that dive. Anyway, following that, a Lynx helicopter appeared on the dockside and unloaded cases and cases of booze. I mean, as basically as a thank you, loads of it. Nice. So that got traded up with the Yanks for a field kitchen, because we ended up wearing the Yank chocolate chip uniform rather than bloody DPM, because we're standing out there in desert conditions in green jungle DPM. So it didn't look that good.
I bet you thought you were all Ali as chuff stood there giving it the big lips.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, we got picked up because we were as scruffy as anything. We were black from the oil. Basically, there was so much oil in the air that it just got into the skin, and your hands were nearly black with it, faces nearly black with it. And that's the conditions we were living in. We finally moved out of there. We went inland, clearing a lot of the buildings, clearing trenches of UXO and clearing the beaches of anti-personnel mines. So we were doing demining on the beaches, clearing trenches, and clearing buildings of UXO, IEDs, etc. But it was we were out there 3-4 months. It was hard work, really hard work.
Busy all the time then? Was it that bad? Was there that much kit?
Yeah, God, absolutely. We did one job. We collected up his RPG rounds, 105 mil tank shells, hand grenades, anti-tank mines, the lot. We did one blow of £4,000. So we had £4,000 of bang in this pit, and set it off in a wunner. After that, the Yanks put a limit on it. You couldn't bang anything more than £600.
So your ears still ring at bedtime then, yeah?
Well, the hotel we were staying, because we moved into the Kuwait Carlton. Sounds good, but it was bombed out. It was bombed and burned out pretty much. So we were living in there, and it rattled what was left of the windows, and that was 11 miles away from the blast site. It was massive. But yeah, so we had a wall probably 5 foot high by about 20 foot long of just UX stuff, all the rounds, all the ammunition we found, basically all packed up in one go. But there was loads of it out there. I mean, there was us, Royal Engineers were out there, 6th Regiment, French Foreign Legion were out there doing EOD stuff. There was a lot of guys, US Navy EOD. We were all working pretty much round the clock. I mean, this is where our set came into its own, actually, because it was so simple. We were dismantling it after a dive, chucking swarf eager on it and scrubbing it with a yard brush. And the flows, we didn't dismantle the reducers to change the flow. The flow stayed on for the duration, and it never let us down. And the Yanks were using the Carlton Mark 16, which was all singing, all dancing electronics at the time. So they had the electronic O2 sensors, etc. Those guys, for an 8 o'clock dive, were getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to prep the sets.
Yeah.
All we'd do is check the gas in the set, proto up, we'd have it ready to go in less than an hour. And they were just gobsmacked that we were chucking Swarfiga and stuff and soap on it, scrubbing it with a yard brush, hosing it off with fresh water and hanging it on a line to dry.
That's nuts.
And they said that their kit, it was falling over all the time. It couldn't deal with the oil ingress. All the parts were getting coated with oil, and they basically had to write a lot of their kit off. Well, I was just scrub it down, wash it off, go again.
That's ace, isn't it? So how long were you there? Did you say 3 or 4 months?
Yeah, we went out there 4th of January, I think, came back April 26th.
Just quickly going to interrupt this interview for a word about our sponsors. So the Fancy a Brew podcast is supported by Dive Life Scuba Diving Centre, your one-stop shop for all the recreational and technical dive gear and training needs based out of the UK. They boast a 5-star service with their own in-house gas blending and equipment servicing department. Not only do they have the biggest well-known brands such as Halcyon, Santee, X-Deep and Fourth Element, but they're also helping to promote new and up-and-coming brands reach their full potential. With a long-standing instructional career, Ollie van Overbeek has developed a community of divers through his store's club memberships, offering fantastic discounts on trips and training and equipment. The team at Dive Life teaches everything from open water to advanced Trimix rebreather courses, or even if you want to become an instructor, no matter what your diving aim, they can help. So for more information, take a look at their website, divelife.co.uk, or find them on Instagram and Facebook. And for a 10% discount on internet sales, use promotional code ATND10 at the checkout. Unfortunately, this isn't usable on any already discounted products. So next time that you're looking around for training or kit, give Dive Life a click. And now let's get back onto this episode. Did you come back with like any, what's the word I'm looking for? Mementos, did you make any because when I did Afghanistan, everyone was making stuff and it called it like trench art. I got a book when I got home about it. Obviously we were on the ground, not sort of on the seaboard as such, but the stuff we could pick up and make stuff from and bring home.
We brought some back. I mean, when my son was born in '96, he had one of my mementos as a lunchbox. He had an emptied out anti-tank mine as a lunchbox. Because some of the Italian anti-tank mines, they had a nice Gucci little carrying handle.
Yeah.
So once you took all the bang and everything out of it, all you had was a plastic box that unscrewed, basically a quarter turn unscrewed.
Sweet.
So when he went to primary school, I think he was the only kid that carried his sarnies in an anti-tank mine. But yeah, we went back through Basra Airport and they had the amnesty box there, and some of the stuff that lads were trying to bring through, and full RPGs, etc., in the amnesty box. And you think, well, what the hell are you going to do with that when you get home?
Above fire. Just sat there on fireplace.
Yeah, there was so much crap laying around, but we knew basically if we brought stuff back, we were just asking for trouble.
Yeah.
Because as it was, all our kit got ripped through by the Special Investigations Branch of the mod police. When it landed at Lynham, they went through all our containers. So yeah, it would have been a little bit risky to bring stuff back. But I've got a couple of bits and bobs. I think I got an Iraqi banknote with Saddam's face on it. But I think most of the stuff I got rid of. You collect so much crap when you're in the forces. You just collect a load of typical divers. If it wasn't bolted down, we'd have it.
It's all good. It's great in your office, isn't it, when you're still in? But when you come home, you've got to make a home, haven't you? And I'm sure your wife don't want all that shite everywhere.
Well, the Mark 1 didn't. I had about four hampers worth of just crap.
Yeah.
That you just collect it. You see something, you go, yeah, I'll have that. And anything shiny went in the hamper. Any odd bits of if we used to turn up on jobs or go up on work up in Scotland, and you'd be in such pirate rig that there'd be all sorts. There'd be guys wearing bloody German tank commanders overalls, Russian cold weather kit, all sorts when you're on the boat up in Scotland. But it was just whatever worked.
You mentioned earlier that you'd they don't do it now, but the sat diving was a thing for the Royal Navy. So 2 questions. Firstly, why don't they do it? And secondly, tell us about what you did do.
So for people, saturation diving is a bit of physics, that at a certain point, your body will not absorb any more gas. So we breathe oxygen, we utilize oxygen, we inhale oxygen, we exhale carbon dioxide as a byproduct of that. The nitrogen in the gas, we do nothing with. It's an inert gas. So that stays in, and it's your nitrogen that's absorbed in your blood that gives you decompression sickness if you don't follow your deco rules. So, but there comes a point where the tissues reach a saturation point, and it doesn't matter how much longer you stay under pressure, you will not absorb any more gas. So the decompression penalty remains the same once you've reached saturation point. And that was it. It's more efficient to keep divers under pressure and have them just excurse to a dive job than to keep going up and down from the surface doing all your stops, etc. So the Navy's had a SAT capability for, God, years and years, since probably the 50s or 60s. I mean, they still held one of the records for one of the deep dives. George Wookie in a standard outfit did something like 600 feet back then, which was the deepest standard dive. So they had a SAT capability. They had the HMS Reclaim, which was an old boat. Then they chartered the Seaforth Clansman from a civvy company, which was the one that went down to the Falklands, did some work down there. It was before my time. And then the Navy decided to develop its own seabed operations vessel, HMS Challenger, which had a 12-man SAT capability, 300-meter SAT dive capability. It could operate a dive submersible, submarine rescue, and also what they call a towed unmanned submersible, which is basically a ROV on the end of a big long cable. So theoretically, it could do everything. In reality, the only thing that actually really worked was the dive system. So I think it was 1991, they decided that the Navy didn't need a SAT capability anymore, that the Challenger was costing too much money, so it was scrapped, and with it went the Navy's SAT capability. So they no longer had any capability, so they'd have to hire in a civvy company. So jobs on that, I mean, we were proving the system most of the time. We did the first 50-meter dynamic positioning dive. So normally SAT boats would have a 4-point anchor, so they'll be anchored via 4 anchors, and just by hauling in and letting out, they position themselves over a dive site. With dynamic positioning, you're using satellite fix and bow thrusters and rotatable props to keep your position with no anchoring, which is great theoretically. Occasionally they can get a runoff, which can lead to you getting dragged across the seabed.
Well, interesting you say that. The last guest on the last season was Chris Lemons off the Last Breath.
Last Breath, and that's what happened with her. They had a DP runaway, and off they went. So we did the first. I mean, the Navy was well behind the civvy world. By the time Challenger came out, most civvy boats were running a 2-bell system. So that they could keep divers on the job all the time, because basically they're about making money. So basically one bell had come down, the others go up. So you always got divers on the job. With ours, it was basically up and down, transition to the job. We had the largest or second largest bell in the world. I think it was only the Russians that had a bigger one. 8.3 cubic meters, cost a fortune to fill it. And helium, I think about £5 a cubic meter back then. It was so prohibitively expensive to keep filling the bell up with gas and venting it down each time. Whereas a civvy company would have the smallest bell they could get away with cramming 3 guys in. I mean, it was luxury. You could get up, walk around in it. It was fantastic. I mean, if you see some of the bell footage from civvy boats, the 3 guys are sitting there and the heads are virtually touching when they're in the bell. A tiny claustrophobic environment. So most of the time we were just proving the system, doing drill dives, deck sat dives, etc. We had a little bit of a mini incident on that. If we hadn't have managed to get the press stopped, I think 6 of us would have ended up not being here at the bottom once we got to the bottom. It was a 50-meter deck dive, and the drills were that you're supposed to go onto bibs, built-in breathing system, which was fixed gas mix. So you'd establish the partial pressure of O2 by pressing on air to 10 meters. Then the rest of the press would be done on pure helium. So you'd establish your PO2, you go on to bibs, breathe in your bottom mix, start the scrubbers up in the chamber, and you were all supposed to be sat upright. Spanish practices, what used to happen, you get in the chamber, it go down to 10 meters and basically get into your pit, cover yourself up and clear your ears on the way down. Well, I was on top bunk, which was directly under the helium press, and I started feeling a bit iffy, odd, started seeing stars, looked over at the guy opposite me and he'd gone blue and was fitting. So he was lips, fingers, blue, the lot, and he was fitting on the top. So I got off the bunk, collapsed straight onto the deck of the chamber. What had happened was the helium had just basically pushed all the O2 in the chamber down to the bottom. So we had a top and a bottom PO2 monitor. The top PO2, I think, was 0.06 bar, and the bottom one was brilliant. So when she got to the bottom, I was breathing good air. Got to put bibs on him, signal for the press to stop. If we hadn't stopped the press, then basically we'd have got down to the bottom, and the two of us, at the very least, the two guys on the top bunks wouldn't have been here anymore. No. That was the closest I got really to.
Lucky you could get out of your pit and actually collapse, because
well, that's it. I just sort of rolled out of the pit, landed on the deck. My legs went from under me, landed on the deck, and within a couple of seconds I was breathing good air again.
Yeah.
But the civvy companies never press on pure helium. They always press on a very, very slight O2 mix, so you can't go anoxic. Helium anoxia, apparently, you can't recover from. So yeah, that was the end of the SAT capability. So the Navy didn't retain a deep diving. I mean, now they've got 83 meters with the CDLSE. Well, once the SAT capability went out, they were limited to 75 meters surface supplied diving on Heliox.
Right.
So that was another role of the Fleet Team 2, was deep water recovery, which was based for the subs up in Faz Lane. So in deep water berths, anything went over the side, etc. We've got a deep water recovery team. So we used to work up 75 meters, and you do that from 2-3 meter inflatables, rafted up. So you'd be 75 meters straight out of an inflatable on the end of a hose. They were good dives.
That sounds epic. When I had Chris on last year, I remember asking him about not only so much the claustrophobic environment of living in saturation for like a month or wherever they were in, but then going as deep as like 100 meters where it's pitch black, generally on your own, and if your light went out and you look round, there's no ambient lights, you've no idea where you are. The claustrophobia in such a big space must be horrendous, even if you're not claustrophobic.
Yeah, I mean, it's as black as pitch down there. And it doesn't matter how clear the water is, light will only penetrate so far. So it's almost like there's a wall of black in front of you. And it can be unnerving, actually, because things start to play on your mind. I mean, I've always hated the dark. I'm one of these people that's got this horrible fear that when you come out of a dark place, that there's something behind me. So it took a lot to be in that type of environment. One of the latter dives I did after I come out of the mob, when I was working in Iceland, we were in 83 meters of water in one of the fields doing body recovery off a fishing vessel that had sunk. And that was like pitch black. The water was gin clear, but it was absolutely pitch black down there. Your helmet light didn't penetrate very far. You're working inside a wreck that's on its side. So you've got all the debris and that to work through. And it really did need work to keep sort of the anxiety from coming up or panicking. So it was a testament to the training that the Navy put you through, of putting you into stressful situations all the time, just to basically develop that resilience that you could get yourself with. So as a diver yourself, you know that panic underwater is one of the worst possible things you could ever do. Yeah. It takes work. Sometimes you'll get a stressful situation that needs you to sit back and just take a breath and get yourself squared away before you actually then think about what you need to do to get out of what it is. And panic will kill you underwater, basically. Simple as that.
I was working away last week, and a few lads that was on this job had never met before, and we were all just chatting like we are now, and they were quite interested in what I do as a diver. And one of them was in the police, and he's saying, "Have you never fancied like working as a police diver or anything like that?" And I'll be honest, whilst the police doesn't really interest me as a career, neither does going in doing search and recovery and finding dead people. You know, that would probably be the biggest nightmare for me, is having to recover someone from the water. So knowing you're going out to those great depths, it's dark, it's cold, slightly alien environment, you didn't know the boat you're on. How did that sort of play through your mind to go and recovering people like that?
I mean, we've done body recoveries in Portsmouth team, because that was also one of the jobs. If anybody went in the water, you got suicides, etc., or accidental drownings, the team would be called out to recover them. You know what you're going in for, but when you find it, it shits the life out of you. It really does, because quite often the water's gloomy, and you have maybe 3 or 4 feet viz. So when you get to the object that you're trying to find, it comes out at you at the gloom, and it doesn't matter how much prepared you are, you're still big sharp intake of breath, backside goes, and it's like, get your heart rate back under control. It's like the jump scares in horror movies. It's exactly like that. You know what's coming, but even when it comes, it's still a shock, a big shock. And then there's the physical task of manipulating something that's the same size as you or bigger, that's not going to want to move where you want it to. I mean, the particular one with the Iceland job, we had to get one of them out of the cabin and then up onto the upper deck to get him into a stretcher. And the guy was bloody giant. He was well over 6 foot. Yeah. And obviously rigor mortis has set in. So you're trying to maneuver this 6 foot board that out of a cabin through the superstructure of the ship and then onto a stretcher. So it's physically hard work. And you kind of have to put it to the back of your mind what it is that you're doing, but still have a degree of respect for the fact that you're maneuvering a person around.
Yeah, I think it's the texture would unnerve me, especially if you've been down there some time. It's not so much the seeing of what's in front of me. I guess to some end you can, just like you said, it's a job. You're there. You know what you're expecting that to be what it's, because you know what you're going doing, don't you? And the laboriousness of moving around doesn't daunt me too much. It's getting that touch, even through a pair of gloves. You can tell whether it's slimy or it's rough, or it's stiff or it's soft. And I think that would be the bit that even now I'm almost cringing, mate, thinking about that job. I don't know if I could do it ever.
Well, we also did that out in the Gulf. Basically, if we happened to cross any human remains in the water, if you spotted them from the helo or whatever, the drill was we'd go and recover them and then repatriate them. Because I mean, they were Iraqis, but the drill was we'd repatriate the human remains. So we'd take them back on board. They'd go into the freezers, and then they'd be repatriated to Iraq. And we did one particular one, and because gunboats had been blown up, there was bodies in the water occasionally. We spotted one, and it was flip of the coin or spoof to see who was going to get it. Because the drill was basically you went down in the strop, you got hold of the person, connected the strop around you and them, and then went back up in the strop. So you'd got this body basically right in your face on the way back up into the helo. So I won this one, didn't have to do it. The lad that went down got to it, and it was not much more than a torso. So he got it into the strop, and basically it stunk. So we got it up into the cab of the helicopter. The pilot come back. He was, "We're not having that in here. Get it out." So we had to then back out the helo. It went, and we had to scrub the bloody cab of the helicopter with bleach when we got back. And it was days before the smell went away. And this poor sod had this thing strapped to him on the way back up. So that was one job I was glad I didn't have to do.
Good. I tell you, that hadn't even occurred to me. Now I just feel sick. So the police job for me is a no-starter. Thanks very much.
Yeah, no worries.
So what made you think about going for selection then?
I don't know. It just seemed a natural progress. We had one lad before my time went across to Hereford. 2 lads before me went across to Poole. We did quite a bit of work. On team 2, we had a SBS sergeant on there as one of our supervisors. There was a cross drafting. So one of the senior NCO divers would go to Poole driving the SDVs, and we had one of the Poole guys attached to Fleet Diving Unit 2, and then we had Fleet Diving Unit 1, which is the maritime counter-terrorist unit that used to work closely with the lads from Poole and from Hereford. So it almost seemed like a natural progression. And again, it's the old, once you get to the top of the mountain, you see another summit to another mountain, you want to do that. And that's kind of what I am. I wanted to be a sat diver because they went deeper than anybody else. And I wanted to be a clearance diver because they did the diving full time. So when it was basically in that, it was like, what's the next mountain? What's the next biggest one to do? So I think there were, at the time I went through, August 91, there were two other lads went through. One went the selection before me, one went the selection before him. I was unsuccessful. In hindsight, my fitness was great, but my soldiering wasn't. You know, you're Matlow, basically. They say the worst thing in the world is to give a Matlow a gun. So my field craft, soldiering, patrol drills, etc., were not up to scratch. So I got.
That's kind of to be expected, though, because it wasn't your role in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Some guys got through, some guys didn't. I didn't. I got canned just before jungle before it went off to the J. So, but it was. I got offered a place to go back, but I'm not doing that again. I think the one thing that got me through each day was tomorrow can't be any worse than today. It always was, but you kind of got that thing that the day's done. It's great, crack on. Knowing to go back and do it again, knowing pretty much what was coming the following day, the day after that, nah. Plus the fact I'd already met the Mark 1 Mrs. Douglas then, and it was not the sort of thing that was basically conducive to a happy relationship with a new girlfriend or to be wife. So I just went, nah, that's done. I'll give it my best shot. I probably in hindsight didn't want it enough, because otherwise I would have turned around and gone, yeah, I'm going back regardless of anything else.
So at the time of being RTU'd, in comparison to now, do you look on how you felt differently, in like remorseful or a sense of pride and accomplishment that you did try?
I always feel I didn't quit. That's the worst thing, is quitting. Because I mean, in the vast majority of things like this, most blokes self-select. They quit. Especially in something like that. There's certain things that you have, standards that you have to meet. And in the first day, you had the PT tests. You didn't know what the standards were, but they were standards. You had to achieve so many sit-ups, so many pull-ups, so many press-ups. Then the load carry, you knew you had to hit a mile in under 10 minutes with a 100-pound load. If you didn't, you'd get canned straight away. You were told what the times for the test marches were. So you had to do your 10-mile in less than 3.5 hours. You had to do your 20-mile in less than 12 hours. You had to do your 30-mile in less than 20 hours. No, so I've got the time. So you've got 24 hours to do all 3 test marches. It's 3.5, 6.5, and 12 for your test marches. So you knew your times, but everything else, you didn't know what they were expecting. So you just had to give it your best. So I don't know. I gave it my best, and it was something that was probably beyond my control that got me cut. It wasn't the fact that I wasn't working hard enough. It wasn't the fact that I was not fit enough. I mean, my training, every lunchtime, I was loading up a Bergen with like 70 pound in a Bergen, going up and down the stairs in our admin block in the diving section. Probably about 6-7 flights of stairs, up and down that for an hour, running God knows how many miles a day, gym at lunchtimes, gym in the evenings, etc. So I mean, I put loads of training into it and loads of time, because I didn't want to go down there and just flake out on the first day. Loads did. That was the amazing thing. I mean, I got down there, was 140 of us started, and dropping like flies. And these are all like seasoned bootnecks, and they're not making the grades. And I thought, how am I? Because they took one look at me as soon as I put the blue uniform on. They're like, oh bloody hell, Jack's here. And I wasn't expected to get past day one. No, I was pleased in what I did, but I still think, what if? maybe if I had my time again, I'd go in the Marines and do it through that way, so I'd get the soldier. But it wasn't to be.
So what happened when you left the army? You never left the army because you're never in. When you left the Navy,
So
what did you do with
I
yourself?
left that. I started teaching recreational diving. On resettlement, I got through PADI instructor courses, resettlement, at a well-known diving centre in Cambridgeshire,
right?
Inland Diving Centre. Taught there for a little while. Taught PADI. I introduced tech diving to them. Actually, I got them involved with IEDs, instituted first rebreather courses there. So I was IED rebreather instructor on the Atlantis, as it was then. I think it became the Dolphin.
Oh, the Drager.
Yeah, and the Inspiration.
Right.
So that shows how far back that was. Well, Inspiration had just come out. I mean, the Dolphin was effectively a LAR-5 that you wore on your back. It was exactly the same box, exactly the same breathing hose, exactly the same scrubber rig, counter lung. Instead of wearing it on the chest, it was strapped to your back.
And white.
And theirs was an oxynitrogen mix, basically, because of the reducer on it. You're thinking, well, I've seen that before. I've used that before, but in the black version and worn on my bloody chest.
Yeah.
So I taught there for a while, and that's how I got the Iceland job, actually. I was talking to a guy who was an ex-clearance diver, and he said, "Do you fancy a job?" And I said, "What is it?" And he told me the story. His fishing vessel had sunk in Iceland, and apparently anybody can go to the Icelandic Prime Minister and petition them. So the family of the crew petitioned the Prime Minister of Iceland to have the wreck investigated.
Yeah.
So a couple of SAT companies tendered for it, and it was like millions to put a SAT boat over the top of this fishing vessel in this fiord. And a civvy guy who ran Seawork Marine Services down in Romsey in Hampshire also tendered, with the original idea that we were going to do this on Carlton Mark 16 rebreathers. So effectively down a shot rope, free diving with rebreather on in 83 meters of water. A little bit sketchy. So bits and bobs happened. It was on, it was off, it was on, it was off. Then it was off for ages. And I bumped into him a few months later, and he went, "You still interested in the job?" I went, "Yeah." He says, "It's definitely on. It's a goer. They're doing it surface supplied. So it's going to be basically K&B 18s, super lights, bail out, and do it from the side of one of the Icelandic gunboats. We'd be stationed over the top of it, and we'd do this dive." So we were on site for about 4 weeks, doing dives every day, trying search and recovery for the crew, videography of various parts of the ship, so they could try and ascertain what had happened to the ship, because there was a bit of discussion about why it had sunk. The company that owned the boat was suggesting that it was probably down to an error on the part of the captain.
Right.
Families are saying no, it wasn't. So they wanted it investigated, and they also wanted the dredging plough recovering off the back end, because that was quite an expensive bit of kit. So we were on site for about 4 weeks doing that, diving 83 meters, 1684 mix, and then O2 from 10 meters to the surface, and then surface decompression, which I hate surface D. It's so bloody sketchy, because you've got 5 minutes from hitting the surface to being back at chamber bottom on gas. We did that, and it still remains the deepest commercial job in Iceland ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got 2 of the crew back. Couldn't find the others. Searched all around, but whether they went over the side of the ship before it sank or whatever, we recovered 2 of the crew, and they were obviously repatriated and given proper burial.
Yeah.
So good job. Yeah, enjoyed that one.
So have you done any more of them? Like sort of more commercial jobs? Have you carried on with that kind of work?
I did for a little bit, and then the Mark One decided that I ought to get a proper job rather than buggering off for a month at a time. I mean, one of the reasons I left the mob was that Mark One had fallen pregnant. She was due to give birth, and I didn't want to be one of these absent fathers.
Yeah.
Who's away for 3 months, back for a couple of weeks on leave, away for 3 months. So that sparked my decision to sort of take the voluntary redundancy that they were offering at the time. So I went back out to Iceland once more, working for the same dive contractor, just doing civils, basically, sort of inshore pipeline work, shoring up pipelines, bits and bobs like that. I was out there for about another 6 weeks. And I think one of the things I did was down at the Western Islands. Do you remember Free Willy film?
Yeah.
When they were going to basically let the killer whale go and sort of try and renaturalize it, and they built a bloody great pen off the Western Islands to have this in, so it could try and learn the language of the local pods. So I was involved in building this big pen that this killer whale was going to go in.
Is this the one that John Bishop did a thing on the telly a while back?
Ooh, don't know. But I mean, it wasn't successful because you can't rewild killer whales, because apparently even pods in Iceland or wherever have their own dialect. So one pod can't actually effectively communicate with another.
Yeah.
And they're so sort of set in it that one whale will not go to another pod. So it never worked out for it. But yeah, that was the last time I did any commercial work, and then I ended up bloody joining the prison service for 12 years.
So have you just watched that other drama that's been on ITV? And
Screw, that's brilliant.
Yeah. Were you not killing yourself at that?
There's little bits of it you're thinking, oh, that wouldn't happen. But how they're portraying the prisoners is absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
And the stereotypes of the staff are quite accurate, actually. So it's you watch some of them like Bad Girls. I would never watch that because it's just not in any way form realistic. But this has actually got a good bit of realism to it. Whoever wrote it has done a bloody good job with the writing, because it's staff attitudes is bang on, and the prisoners are just perfect portrayals. They could have filmed it in a proper prison for all you know. Yeah. So yeah, we've been watching that one, but so I won't be going back to Trigger Point unless it's that like itch that you can't stop scratching. Just watch it, just see how much worse it gets.
Well, we were kind of gutted because a lot of these series comes out now. They show the first one, but you can go straight on the iPlayer and watch the rest of them, can't you? So we thought we weren't ready for bed at 10 o'clock last Sunday, so I thought we'll see if the next one's on, and it wasn't. But I know what you mean. Whilst it's not military, they're doing some things that I would have seen. So they're using a shrike and that to set it off. So some of them, so I'm explaining that to my wife, and it wasn't that bad because I don't really know how the police would interact the way that they were, because I've never been in the police. But when I do see some of the dramas, certainly the military ones, I'm just like, this is gash. I can't watch the state of the berets and stuff like that they were. I'm just like, it's fucking horrendous. I know you said as you were a kid you had like your Action Man and you were watching stuff like Jacques Cousteau and that. But had scuba diving come after you or during your Navy career, or had you done it before?
When I was working at the dive centre, I got in with a few lads from Skegness doing wreck diving. I did a couple of nice, decent wreck dives. We did the Moldavia off of Brighton. Because again, it's all if I'd have stayed in that mine, I would have gone on to the trimix side of it as well. The trimix was still sort of in its infancy a lot, and I would have gone on to the sort of better rebreathers if I stayed in that sort of environment. But I mean, I didn't learn to swim till I was 11, and if you'd have told my mother what I'd end up doing for a living, she'd have told me they're off the rocker, because I absolutely hated the water. Yeah, everything I remember, I had all the Action Man diver stuff. Any stuff that was on TV, Jacques Cousteau, I used to watch that diligently. I mean, I think the thing that really did it was when I watched Thunderball as a kid. That dive sequence, the underwater dive fight between Spectre and the CIA and Bond, that was it for me. That was, I think, was what sparked it off. Right. And I had an interest in chemistry as a kid and was always making shit that would blow up. And I was on the verge of getting into trouble for a lot of stuff like that, because I was mixing stuff up that I shouldn't be mixing up as a kid, and setting it off behind the playgrounds at school in secondary school. So that type of thing, I guess it was always destined that I was going to end up diving and blowing crap up for a living. Yeah,
I find it strange that blokes such as yourself that haven't been brought up on the coast, haven't had an interest in the sea as such. You know, like you've not been sailing every weekend, or your dad didn't have a boat, and all this kind of stuff, end up in the Navy. You'd think that someone who lived on the coast would. And then even worse than that, how do you end up on a submarine? Because it's not like you can have any prep to go on a submarine. They can't just let you go on like a look at life or like a work experience and see if you like it. You've got to train to be a submariner, and you just take the jump straight in.
They're all weird submariners.
Well, probably so, yeah.
They are. They are proper weird.
Mm. Mate, it's been great. It's been great having a chat with you because
Thank you.
you've opened up some doors there that I've never thought about before, and certainly the sort of commercial aspect of diving, whilst it interests me, it's not something I've ever thought I'd perhaps investigate any further. Whereas I see some of the guys I've had on here before, certainly like Phil Short, whilst he's been doing these kind of expeditions, going finding things and recovering things, he's took it that next step now. So he's gone into like the full surface supplied stuff, and he's doing deeper, longer stuff, all within the confines. Is the confines, is that the right word? Where he's doing this just deeper than what he was before and for longer. But I just don't know if it's something I'd ever go down now because I've gone down enough avenues, I think. But it's so interesting to see like what you recovering.
It was a natural thing. A lot of the guys that were in the branch have made really good careers in the commercial world. I mean, there's some guys that have done some really successful jobs and have gone on to make that their career. And I mean, there's one lad, he's just quit now. I think he's 60 odd, and he's just quit the diving commercially. And he did it from when he left the mob back in the 70s.
Yeah.
And has had a glittering career. But there's other lads that gone different directions. And just once they leave the mob, just say, screw that, I don't want to be in the diving anymore.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think I'd honestly say it's the best job I've ever done, really. I mean, it's serviced all the things you want to do as a kid. I've got to dress up in black, jump out of aeroplanes, bloody do sneaky swims, blow crap up. Yeah, it really serviced the inner child perfectly.
It's great. And you can do that as a grown man or woman and getting paid for it.
That's it. Did it as a grown man, got paid for it, and had someone indulge with childish habits. And, work with some of the best blokes in the world. I mean, one guy who's sadly no longer with us died in a demining accident in the Sudan.
Really?
A guy called Darby Allen, one of the best. He was out with us in the Gulf. Him and another guy called Phil Hammond, two of the best leaders I've ever worked for in the mob. Absolutely, I would go anywhere with them guys without question. It's absolutely fantastic.
I'm just looking for your Instagram now, and obviously there's a lot of your civvy life in there as well. It looks like you got a bit of a drinking habit, as we talked about before, or drinking problem. But certainly your pictures from your time in, like the UXO stuff, you've just got racked up there, and boxes of hand grenades. You've got one there, haven't you?
That's gone mental. That picture. It's got
it?
nearly 25,000 likes on it. I just haven't got a clue why. I don't know where it's got. Yeah, I don't know what's gone on with it. Some scruffy ass bloke with a ginger beard with a box of hand grenades, dressed like a tramp.
Sounds like a cool guy.
So yeah, I mean, there's a guy who's compiling a lot of history in the branch, and he's written several books. A lad called Ginge Fullen. I mean, he's an absolute nut job. I was on the SAT course with him, and when we were down the local on a Sunday afternoon having a beer, he'd be loading his rucksack up, running up and down the mountain at the back of the digs. He did Everest Marathon, all sorts. He's actually got the world record for climbing the highest peaks in each country. His ambition is to climb the highest peak in every single country in the world.
Right.
The bloke is absolutely amazing, and he's written some books, and I've done quite a lengthy interview about the time out in the Gulf with him for a future book that's coming up. Nice.
What's that Uncommon Grit? What's that?
Uncommon Grit, that's Navy SEALs.
Right. Is that a book or something?
So it's a pictorial book about going through the BUDS basic underwater dive school at Coronado.
Right. Just seeing that there.
Yeah.
Just have a quick.
It's only like a coffee table photo book. There's not a lot of words in it, but
no.
I mean,
I like them because I can I can read really, but you know what I mean. I much prefer staring at pictures. If I get a magazine or whatever, it's the pictures I stare at. The actual written content, I barely pay much attention to those kind of photographic coffee table things. That's like the best Christmas present really for me. So what are you up to in life generally now? Are you still in the prison service?
No, God, I left that in 2010. Now work health and safety. So I'm a health and safety advisor for 2 colleges at Cambridge University.
Right. That's a bit of a change, isn't it?
Yeah, I kind of fell into it, really. I mean, I kind of fell into the security world. I was doing door supervisor for quite a while.
Yeah.
I ended up working on the Olympics in risk management and compliance management. So I sort of got into the British standards and health and safety aspect through there. And then in the previous job at one of the other colleges, health and safety was kind of taking up more and more of my time. So this job came up, went to my NEBOSH general certificate, so I actually got some certification. And this job come up, so I thought, yeah, go for it. It's
All right.
Keeps me busy.
Is it fulfilling? Are you at that time of life where you just it's happy enough for you?
No, it's not. I still want something to. I'm not set out for just sitting down doing a sedentary, crappy job. I mean, me and the missus, we're still out. We're physically active, and we've gone We've took the dog up Ben Nevis. We've done the fan dance over Brecon Beacons. So we've done that twice in full winter conditions. Took the dog on that. Thought we'd nearly killed him. So I'm not ready to just settle down into a boring job.
No.
I like the challenge. I like to keep myself active and keep a sense of responsibility. I mean, I go and work in bloody Asda and toss my time away till I'm retiring there. Nah, it's a good job. And I take a common sense approach to health and safety. Everybody says, oh, health and safety, you can't do this, can't do that. Well, you can do it, but you just got to put certain procedures in place to enable you to do it. So I take a bit more of a pragmatic attitude towards it. Is it likely something's going to go wrong? If the answer is yes, do something about it. If it's not, crack on. That's it. Well, hopefully I've given you enough to do a bit decent podcast.
Right. Take it easy, mate. Thanks for coming on.
No worries. Cheers. Take care.
Cheers, pal.
Bye.
Bye. So that brings us to the end of the episode, and I hope you've enjoyed this week's guest enough to subscribe to the Fancy a Brew podcast and leave us a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts. Don't forget to take a look at Dive Life's website and social media channels, as they always have some great deals available, and you can use promo code ATND10 at the checkout to get some money off any non-discounted items. For more information on this episode, take a look at the description or follow us on Instagram for all the latest news and upcoming releases. Thanks for listening. I'll see you on the next one.